I hope you're doing well. I want to thank you so very much for joining me today. Psalm number 5, we see David's prayer, I'll say, for guidance. David's prayer for guidance. Psalm chapter 5 says, "Give ear to my words, O Lord, consider my meditation, give heed to the voice of my cry, my King and my God, for you," he says, "for to you I will pray, my voice you shall hear in the morning, O Lord, in the morning I will direct it to you, and I will look up." So he says, in the morning, I will pray to my God. He goes on in verse 4, "For you are not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness, nor shall evil dwell with you. The boastful shall not stand in your sight. You hate all workers of iniquity." He says, "You shall destroy those who speak falsehood. The Lord abhors the bloodthirsty and deceitful man." Verse 7. Before this, David is saying these are things that the Lord hates, the things that the Lord will not stand for. And in verse 7 he says, "But as for me, I will come into your house in the multitude of your mercy." He says, "In fear of you I will worship toward your holy temple." Verse 8, notice this. He says, "Lead me, O Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies. Make your way straight before my face." Verse 9, "There is no faithfulness in their mouth. Their inward part is destruction. Their throat is an open tomb. They flatter with their tongue." He says in verse 10, "Pronounce them guilty, O God. Let them fall by their own counsels. Cast them out in the multitude of their transgressions, for they have rebelled against you." Verse 11, "But let all those rejoice who put their trust in you. Let them ever shout for joy," he says, "because you defend them." He says, "Let those also who love your name be joyful in you, for you, O Lord, will bless the righteous." He says, "With favor you will surround them as with a shield." So going back up to verse 1, he's entreating God to hear his prayer. And he makes reference to in the morning. So we get the idea that David is praying this prayer in the morning. He says in verse 4 that God is not a God who takes pleasure in wickedness. In other words, that he knows that God wants righteousness from people. He says in verse 7 that he's going to try his best to be righteous. And in verse 8, he asks God to lead him in that righteousness. In verses 9 through 12, he compares the wicked and the righteous, just to cement that idea that David knows full well that he needs to be righteous. And I'm reminded of Psalm 119, verse 105, where he says, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." That's the reason David is praying here. He's praying, we see in verse 8, so that God will guide him. He says, "Lead me, O Lord, in your righteousness because of my enemies." He says, "Make your way straight before my face." So today, I'd like to encourage you to, just as David did, ask for guidance in your life. Ask for guidance today and tomorrow and the rest of your life. And God will. We know good and well, as David says, "My voice you shall hear in the morning," that God will hear yours as well. Thank you so very much for watching, and I certainly hope to see you tomorrow.